Good evening, I'm TJ from 103.3 Amp Radio. I host the TJ Show weekday mornings on the radio, and welcome to Jubilee Christian Church in Boston. I'm so honored to welcome Pastor Matt Thompson.
The man, the myth, the legend. How y'all doing?
I'm excited to chat about the book. So we had a chance to go back and forth on some stuff up in your office. I like, do people know that you have swords in your office?
I don't know if people know that.
No, it's decorative swords, not sharp, but I thought that was really cool when I first walked in. I thought, not that anyone would mess with you, but they're really not messing with you now. I love that.
So you guys heard about TJ, and you understand that this guy is literally a miracle. And the way that we connected was just supernatural. And I know this is about me, but I just wanted to this guy's a real big deal.
No, that's not true.
This guy's a big
no,
deal.
It's not.
This guy is the top radio show on 103.3. And, you know, God uses everyone, and God uses angels. Well, first of all, I mean, when I wrote the book, for many years, I didn't know if someone would buy it. I wasn't sure if someone would enjoy it. And the first day that the book came out, it wasn't released yet, and it was a Wednesday night. TJ came to a shift service, and it was the first time that we had met, we had connected. And he said, "Pastor Matt," and we met, and he introduced himself to me, and he was like, "I got your book." And I'm like, "What do you mean you got my book?" I'm like the book hasn't even been out yet. How did you get my book? And he said, "No, it's right out in my car." And he went out and brought the book in the church, and just that one person believing that he would purchase the book just lifted my spirits. And I said, "Man, you know, this guy doesn't even know me. If he bought my book, then I'm believing that God's going to do something supernatural." Thank you, man, for just being obedient to God and for being that angel, that voice, or that person that really encouraged me during the very beginning processes of this journey.
Well, it's amazing to even hear that from you, and thank you for saying that, but it's crazy the way that all came about. I had just started coming to the church more regularly, and I saw that you were writing a book, and it came up, I think, on one of your Instagram posts, and I thought, you know what, I should just search Amazon. Let me see if it's available and I could order it. And it came up, Atmosphere Shift by Pastor Matt Thompson. There was no picture. It was like the picture Amazon defaults to, this grayed out box. And I thought, well, this has got to be the book. So I'll pre-order it just to support everything. And it showed up at my house like the next day. And I thought, that is so weird. It turned out there was a glitch within Amazon, and it shipped it to my house at like super speed. And I had it before anyone was supposed to have it. And so it was a hardcover copy of the book, and my wife Jess and I were coming to prayer service that night, and I left it in the car because I was like, I want to show Pastor Matt that I have the book, but I don't even think it's out yet. I just saw one of the advertisements, and I don't want him to think that, like, you know, something weird is going on. And so Jess is like, yeah, you should probably leave it in the car. And so we just happened to run into you. We weren't even going to run into you afterwards. And I think that was one of the first times we met.
Sure.
And I said, Jess was like, "Oh, he's got your book in the car." And I was like, "No, don't say anything." And he was like, "What? Your book is in the car?" He's like, "No, I don't believe it." So I'm like, "All right, let me run out." And I run out to the parking lot. I bring it back, and I could see he's shocked. And I'm like, "Why is he so shocked that I have his book? Isn't he selling this book?" And so we start talking, and he tells me, he's like, "This shouldn't be out yet, but I like the hardcover a lot more than the paperback." And I was like, "Do you want it?" He's like, no, I think they're coming for me. And I said, all right. And then he signed it for me. We took a picture, and I had no idea what the magnitude of that moment was. I was totally blind to it until he shared that with me just, I guess, a couple weeks ago. And I was like blown away and just totally honored that in some wild way, God used me to, serve something that you were sort of questioning, or
He definitely used you.
yeah, you don't know, and that's really a really exciting thing, and it actually leads in perfectly to something that I discovered through reading the book, and then also from talking to you, that you almost weren't going to write a book, that you just decided, you know what, this isn't for me. And here, you've got so many things to talk about, you've got so much to offer, and you start questioning it, almost from a place of like a fear.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're willing, I'd love for you to share and be even more open about why that happened and how you come out of that, because I think anyone who sees you on stage on a Sunday would be like, well, that guy has no fear.
Well, it's an interesting story, and for many years I was working on a book entitled Purpose by Design, and I was preaching on purpose, and I just felt like the Lord kind of gave me this idea, and I started to write it. And for those of you that are writers, it's important to know that sometimes the Lord drops a word into your spirit, and that there's a time frame that is attached to that word. A prophetic word that He speaks to you is endless, but sometimes there's an idea that He drops, and there's an expiration date. And I allowed fear or just my own insecurities to keep me from writing that book. And so when the Lord spoke to me and our team about having an atmosphere conference, really one night the first atmosphere conference, I just said to anyone that was here, I'm writing a book, and next year I'm going to release the book. And so the atmosphere conference was in June, and somewhere around October, my wife and I and Pastor Will and Pastor Debbie were on vacation, and I started talking to them about the book that I was writing. And they're like, so tell me about the book. And so I started telling them about this book on purpose and purpose by design. They're like, what? They're like, no, that's not the book you're supposed to write. They're like, what are you guys talking about? They're like, man, you should be writing a book on worship and prayer. And I was like, well, I have this book that I've been working on called Atmosphere Shift. And I started talking about the book. The book was already written. I just hadn't put pen to paper. And, I've always been the type of person where, to be completely honest, I've just been a person of order. And I didn't want to release a book until I felt as though that my ministry was strong enough where people would want to buy the book. And that I was some type of, I could put a stamp on what I was saying, and people would say, yes, you can listen to him, and he can actually help you to flow in that particular area. So it took a long time for me. And I'm excited that, my wife and my team kind of pushed me. My assistant, Kim, would ask me every week, how's the book going? Because there are so many times where I just kind of felt like, man, I can't do this. And there's some of you out there, I know you feel that way. You feel that way, that there's a word, an assignment, there's something that God has told you to do, and you're afraid. And the Bible says God has not given you a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. And when you stand in the strength of God, not in the strength of man, then God can do some supernatural things with your story.
Do you think a part of that fear was wondering, what is the congregation going to think of it? What are people who come to see you going to think? And did you worry maybe they would think like, oh, who does he think he is? Or did that stuff start beaming into your head? Or?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Because, your family, just as a whole, unbelievable talent just across the board, brilliant preachers, and also your dad is amazing. I've seen him preach and he's just so good. I wonder, it's got to be tough to step into those shoes on a lot of levels. And I just wonder if that plays into it at all.
that didn't. I was blessed to be one of my father's children where, you know, the whole concept of comparison, you know, I was kind of my own person always,
Okay.
in terms of just how I lived and just my gifts were different than my father. And then the Lord gave me a revelation many years ago. Many of you have heard me speak about it, where in Hebrews chapter 12, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let's throw off every weight and every sin that so easily entangles us. So the sin of comparison was something that I had been freed of for many years. And so it wasn't really a matter of my father being an incredible man of God that he is. He's in the room, the GOAT. But it was just really about me and about, you know, the Lord working some things out of me. And I think that there are times where it's God. It's God. Because if I had written this book years ago, or if I had written the Purpose by Design book, then my testimony would be different. I mean, it would have been a powerful book and a powerful testimony. But when I was planning for this event, I made the statement that sometimes we think that God is trying to build a ministry, but in actuality, God is trying to build a man. And if you allow God to build the man, then the ministry will come. And so a part of my wife and I's journey and our struggles and our pain, I think has led to this book being able to be relatable to a lot of different people. So again, it's almost like that timing. There was an expiration on that purpose book, but then God almost threw our testimony in time. And then I had to be willing to kind of say, okay, Lord, you know, no matter what, I'm going to release this. And someone will be blessed. When I went home that night, on Wednesday night, you know, I was on cloud 9. And I told my wife, I'm like, love, somebody bought my book. and it wasn't you, or it wasn't Chris, or it wasn't somebody. There were some people that wasn't my mom. You know what I'm saying?
I feel guilty that I bought it before Pastor Mona.
I'm like, somebody
I'm sorry
bought my
about
book.
that I stole that moment from you.
And it wasn't a family member. So,
well, I love that your family, you guys are so clearly, you love each other so much and you're so supportive, and you can see that here and then beyond here. And I know I saw Pastor Andy preach for the first time at the conference that he was at. And I love that you had this other book and they said, no, you have to do something else. And they pointed you to something about prayer. And of all the hundreds of books you could probably write because of what you know, why do you choose this? What is the backstory why this particular topic is so important?
well, for those of you who do not know where we are seated in a church that was built by prayer. And the foundation of this church has been established upon the bedrock of prayer and fasting and prayer and believing and faith. And of course, you know, I grew up, you know, in a house where, you know, my father woke us up at 5 o'clock in the morning for prayer and devotions. And so prayer is just really it's the lifeblood of our church. But I can honestly say that there have been seasons in my life where if I did not have the relationship that I had with God, and if I did not know how to pray, I did not know how to seek his face, and I did not know how to get in my prayer closet and ask God to comfort me or to strengthen me or to lead and guide me, then like many of us in this room, I don't know where I would be. And so, you know, this first book was really to just write a book about just a testimonial of what prayer can do and how prayer can really move mountains and prayer can really shake things in the heavens and the earth. And I just wanted to open my life up and share, you know, my testimony, which was which is very difficult to do, to talk about, the pain of trying to have children, or believing for my daughter for her life, and for that the Lord would cover her and protect her from the battle of addiction. But I believe that the Lord wanted to use our story and our testimony to encourage someone that when you pray, mountains move.
Well, it's incredible, how encouraging. It's very encouraging to me to hear these stories. I remember one weekend you were up here talking about how you were going in and out of crack houses trying to find your daughter, and I'm like, wow, you're willing to talk about that? That's a very vulnerable thing to share, especially in the position that you're in, where you're the senior pastor. I imagine a lot of churches, people would try and hide that and sweep it under the rug at all costs. But I think you're actually ministering to so many people by being so open about that.
Yeah. And I wasn't by myself, one of my dear brothers who's in the audience, who's not my natural brother, but there are several times where he was there with me. And I think it speaks of the foundation of prayer and faith.
How powerful.
That this church has established. And several times I called my brother Chris Sumner, and I say, Chris, man, can you come with me? And we prayed and believed, and I think that's what prayer established. I think prayer establishes families. And many of us in this room, we may not be related by blood, the same mother and father, but we are related by the same Heavenly Father. And prayer has established that, has knit our hearts together. And so I don't know what I do without prayer. I don't know what I do without my family. I wouldn't know what I do without my wife, but there are some people that are brothers that stick closer than a brother.
It's so clear that, I know in my life I've seen things move because of prayer, and I love reading this because there's so many moments where I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. You put that, like, the perfect words. Mm-hmm. Would you be willing to share the most recent prayer that was answered that you just told me upstairs? I don't know if you want to talk about that yet, but I know you said you've preached it in some other areas, but some trees came to town after some recent prayer, and I think it might be fascinating.
Well, God is so amazing. He can answer two prayers at the same time. So, and even if the prayers are on the opposite ends of the spectrum. So my wife and I are sitting in our home, and she's talking about, hon, now the kids are with, and Maddie's in college, things are about to change for us, and let's renovate the entire house, or let's get a new house, or and I'm sitting there like, Lord have mercy, help me, Jesus. And for those of you that are married, it's like what you intend to say and what you actually say sometimes are two different things. And so I'm trying to just hold myself together because I don't want to spend X number of thousands of dollars to renovate this house. But I know she does. And so we're both there talking, and I think we're both praying, I'm praying, Lord, change her heart, and she's probably just praying, Lord, change his heart. But God, in his infinite wisdom and his divine providence, sends a storm. And the wind and the storm and the rains blew down trees in our backyard. And many of you have heard the story. All three trees hit the house. Bam, bam, bam. And when literally while the trees were hitting the house, I was rejoicing. I was like, thank you, Jesus, because I've been paying on my insurance for many years, and now the Lord has answered both of our prayers. She gets a new renovation, and I don't have to spend a whole lot of money. Hallelujah.
That's an answer to prayer. I mean,
God, that is an answer to
incredible.
prayer, man.
Love that. Well, congratulations on the new rooms.
But now now we're going through renovation, which is a whole nother conversation. You know, I think I've developed like this allergy, you know, from the dust and all of the mites and all of the movement. And so, you know, I'm waking up in the morning and just sneezing my head off. And so I probably need some more prayer. And the Lord can heal me from whatever allergy they're trying to attack me. The devil is a liar and his mother-in-law.
Now, in this book, a lot of mentions of kairos moments, and you preach about it a lot. And clearly, kairos moments have had a major impact on your life. And I know that they have. I actually didn't know what that was called, but when I thought about it, and actually when I read the book and heard you preach on it, I go, oh yeah, it was definitely a kairos moment, because there's no other way to explain that. If you could briefly summarize A, exactly what a kairos moment is, and B, tell us about the kairos moment in your life where you would say that most blew your mind. Because it's fun to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, there's a story that is just an unbelievable kairos moment where I met a gentleman the first time I went to South Africa named Steve Curl, and he just simply said to me, you know, I just happened to just open myself up and was open to him about the challenge that my wife and I was going through to have children.
But it's interesting, just to pause you 1 second.
Yeah.
So when you saw this guy, you told me that you were immediately judgmental of him.
It's not that I was judgmental, it's just he didn't look like the traditional person that is talking to you about, hey, I have a gift of healing, or I can heal, or Lord use me. I'm looking at him like, what? I mean, he's this, you know, 5'10", you know, heavy set, white guy, skinhead, you know, big, huge glasses. I mean, but there was something about the sincerity of our conversation. And we spent that day together playing rugby, and, you know, just he was showing me his orphanage. And I remember going back home, talking to my wife about this man that I met, but not knowing how to keep in contact with him because the world was different then, you know. I wasn't going to be his pen pal. I wasn't going to like write him a letter or something.
Every month on the first day.
How are you, Steve? So, but there was no Instagram, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, and it wasn't like that conference was a conference that I was going to every year. But just so happened that my wife and I were going to South Africa for a different conference, not the same conference that I went to. And as God would have it, you know, I ran into Steve Curl in a hotel lobby where there were hundreds of people that were there. And he remembered what my prayer request was. And he said to me,
the fact that he remembered you, right? Isn't that crazy? In a world where there's no Instagram, like you're not keeping up with you, it was like a one-time thing. It's amazing.
One-time connection, one-time kairos moment. There are kairos moments, you know, where I believe God has ordained that time. He's ordained that moment. He's ordained that conversation. He's ordained that relationship. And God definitely just set that moment up. It was his time. It wasn't my time. Kairos is God's time. Chronos is the chronology of man's time. And but when he saw me the second year, he just literally walked up to me and said, hey, Matt. And I'm like, Steve. And he said, is your wife here? And I'm like, yeah, she is. And he just literally just spoke faith into us. He says, tonight, come into your hotel room. He didn't really care what we were doing that day. He said, I'm coming to your hotel room, and I'm going to bring my prayer partner, and we're going to pray for you. That's awesome. And I'm like, okay. And so he shows up with this, you know, hippie guy, you know, this long hair. Again, I kind of looked at him, and I was just kind of like, this is his prayer partner?
Yeah.
I mean, And, Steve Carl's there, and he's got these big glasses. He's just kind of like, all right, we're going to believe God. And his prayer partner's kind of standing behind us, just kind of waving his arms, kind of like, ooh. And I'm like, oh, God. But, when you're desperate for God and you are desperate for a miracle, man, you'll believe God for anything. It's actually a great place to be. It's a place where God can shift something in your life. The atmosphere can shift. I mean, we've experienced some incredible atmosphere shifts, but I think that was like the really first one, because we weren't in a service. It's easy to kind of be in a room where there are thousands of people and everyone's worshiping and the worship is going and music is going and people are jumping around. But we're literally in a hotel room, floor 15, and it's just the five of us. Me, my wife, Steve, Carl, actually the four of us, and his prayer partner. And he told me, put some oil on my hands. I put my hands on her womb. He put his hand on my hand, and his prayer partner prayed, and we started praying.
Well, it's just insane that there are so many intricate things that had to happen to not only meet him the first time, but then the second time.
Right.
As you explained in the book, like you weren't even supposed to be there, and just the timing of it is amazing. And so I know that story from the book, and hearing you preach on it. Is there another one that stands out where, because I know you've had a lot of them, is there another one that we don't know that is totally mind-blowing and just as crazy?
I don't think there's a story that I could tell that the church hasn't heard, but I don't think the world has heard. I had a kairos moment when I was in college. And the kairos moment was really with God, where I had made one of the worst mistakes I could ever make. It's one of the reasons why people hear me preach. I say God's the God of second chances and third chances and fourth chances, because, I made a mistake when I was a junior in college that literally shook everything in my life. And I ended up being arrested and getting arrested on a Friday night. If you ever want to get arrested, don't get arrested on Friday nights. I mean, don't get arrested, but I mean, if there's a wrong day to get arrested, it's on a Friday.
I'm writing this down.
Yeah, no problem.
No Friday. Thank you.
So, me and my roommate, we both played college basketball. We found a credit card on the street and tried to use it. And stupid mistake, and on a Friday night, and we end up in a holding cell in Atlanta. But probably a room the size of this stage, with 50 metal bunk beds with over 200 men.
Wow.
Talk about the prison system and the reform that needs to take place. No windows, just everything was dark. You didn't know day from night. And I remember in one of the nights, getting on my knees and saying, I had almost like a prodigal son experience, kairos moment, where it was with God. And I said, God, if you can get me out of this situation. I had lost my virginity that year, and I had made some other very bad decisions, and I found myself in this situation. Now I'm in jail. And I said, Lord, if you get me out of this situation, I'll serve you forever. I'll never turn back. I'll give you my life. I heard about it when I was young. I learned about it when I was young. Had incredible parents, had incredible role models. But in that moment, I said, Lord, I want to know you for me, for Matthew Keith Thompson. And right there in that jail cell, man, God came down. And I felt his embrace. I felt his forgiveness. I felt his complete and total restoration. And from that moment, I never have turned back. And that was one of the most incredible kairos moments I've ever had.
It's so hopeful, too, to hear that story, because I'm sure now you tell that story to people and they think no matter how bad it may get, God can take any moment, just totally flip the script. And it's awesome. And I love that you share that. It's just one more really vulnerable thing that I think is so cool that, you know,
Thanks,
you'll
TJ.
put that.
I appreciate it.
I think it's great that you'll, I love that you put that kind of stuff in the book, and I know you're going to have more books to come. Is that right? Have you officially made that announcement yet? Or did I see that on Amazon?
Yes. This book, the first book, was just a testimonial. And for those of you who read the book, I mean, I purposely wrote the book in a way that you could sit down and read it in a week or a weekend or a day. I wrote it in a way that any age level could understand and read in multiple generations. It's one of my heartbeats. But I also I knew that there was a part 2 and I knew there was a part 3. And so part 2 I'm really excited about, because part 2 of the book is going to be, how did we do this in Boston? How is it that a church in New England, we've been able to experience the type of revival that others write about, we've experienced? And part of that is a historical just testimony of my testimony and my upbringing and just some of the things that the Lord has done in our church. And I believe that there is a formula that the Lord has given to us to shift atmospheres. So that'll be the second book. Then the third book is going to be a book where it's going to be a collection of miracles. Because I think by that time we'll have so many miracles within our church that we'll be able to tell your story, your atmosphere shift, your miracle, what God has done for you. Because I believe that when we all win, we win.
Yeah,
we can't win
awesome.
if just one person is winning. I thank God for what God has done for me and the miracle He's done for me and the shift He's done for me, but man, He can do the same for you.
Absolutely. You, yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Well, it's so powerful to hear these stories, you know, and I think, I'm sure you have something that has happened since this book has come out that's been either really encouraging or something you've heard from someone. Yeah. Does anything come to mind? Is there any story where you're like, wow, somebody read this book? I know we're going to have a testimony coming up very soon.
Yeah. So, I mean, what has happened is that, I mean, for many years when my father and I made the transition, I determined that I would be here in Boston, preaching in Boston or South every Sunday. I don't think I ever missed a Sunday for 5 years straight. And I started to speak to the Lord maybe a couple of years ago. I said, Lord, you know, I'm open. And if you want to open the door for me to preach other places, I'm open. And when I wrote this book, the door started to open. And I was somewhere recently where I was carrying my prayer blanket, and a couple came up to me, and after we had spent 2 days at this conference in Houston, they came up to me and they were just asking me about the prayer blanket and just asking me about just my church, and in that moment I just opened my heart to them and just shared with them about the book and about some miracles that the Lord had done in my life. And I mean, right in that hotel lobby, man, God came. And there was a shift that happened right there in that hotel lobby. This couple shared with me the fact that just a week before they came to this conference, that their daughter, their 23-year-old daughter, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Mm. And they didn't know why they were going to this conference, because they were so broken. But in that moment, I was able to pray with them and to share with them just the miraculous, miracle-working power of Jesus Christ. And just, they had heard of it, but then to see someone who had lived it. And just recently I was able to go to their church. My wife and I was able to go to their church in West Virginia. And I was able to pray for the family, and I brought that daughter a prayer blanket, and just to hear of some of the testimonies of just the point of contact and the point of faith that has been opened because of the book, and because really of our willingness to be open to what God wants to do in and through us.
Well, I think it's so great that this is opening those doors, and I think it's so great that you guys have shown up to support Pastor Matt, because I actually, as much as I want to see you every single Sunday morning, it's been a great gift to see these other speakers come in, and you're ministering to other people in other parts of the country, and that wouldn't happen if those doors weren't opening. So I actually think it's a really amazing thing, and I think God's using you in an incredible way.
Thank you, Jesus.
And I think and I think you're just going to see that happening more and more, and it's awesome. So congratulations on that. It's really great. And you know, Pastor Matt is so humble. I've said that to him, and he's like, well, it's not me. And you're right, it's not. But isn't it so great that you're being used in such an incredible way, and you know, including my family. You've ministered to my family in a huge way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we were talking about the kairos moment with Steve Curl, what happened in that hotel room over 19 years ago, just today, my wife and I had an opportunity to pray for a young woman who's believing God for children, who happened to be one of your wife's dear friends. And that same formula of, you know, my wife laid her hands on her womb, and then your wife laid her hands on her hands, and then she laid her hands and I laid my hands, and man, we prayed heaven down. And I told her, after ministering to her for about a good 45 minutes, building her faith, I told her, I said, you know, God is undefeated.
Yeah.
God is undefeated. So it's not us. It's we've allowed the Lord to use us, and God never loses.
It's incredible. So we've got about 10 minutes left here, and I'm going to get to as many of these questions as we can. So we'll start with this one. Thank you to all those who submitted these questions. What do you do if you've been praying for healing for your son and you still have not seen the manifestation of the prayer? How do you hold on to your faith and trust in God when there are times you just want to give up, even to the point that you stop praying the prayer?
Yeah. You know, there have been seasons in my wife and I's life where many of you have literally seen us live our testimony in front of thousands of people for many years, where there's a story where Elisha tells Gehazi to ask the Shunammite woman, what can I do for her? And she doesn't have a son. And the Shunammite woman tells Gehazi, Gehazi tells Elisha, and he says, by this time next year, things are going to change. And there have been seasons in my life where I prayed that, prophesied that, by this time next year, things are going to change. But God's timing and our timing don't always align. And so what I would say to someone that is believing God for a miracle is, man, don't stop praying. Don't stop believing. It sounds so simple, but you could just be one prayer away. You could be just one moment away from your miracle. And I know that there are so many times that, man, I don't know why I'm so emotional. So many times that my wife and I could see in her face, and she could see in my face, that the situation seemed hopeless. But faith just continued to rise in us. And my wife preached an incredible message on Sunday that I've been hearing about. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And so sometimes when you're in a place where you are believing God for something that you cannot see, then you're in the right place.
Well, also going back to your story about being in a jail cell, and it turns out that was one of the most transformative moments of your life that probably served you better than many moments that felt great. So, you know, a bad moment in your mind might actually be the perfect thing that you need to get you to that next step, and you're the living proof of that.
Whoever wrote this question or this prayer request, you know, one day you're going to be on the other side of your miracle, and you're going to be able to have a testimony, and you're going to be able to share with someone else about what you believed and what God was able to achieve.
These tough times can be such a gift.
Yeah.
Another question, I've been coming to the church since the summer, and from the moment I stepped into the church, I felt nothing but love and a connection. Almost a year ago, I was going through some financial issues. Till this day, I still don't have a strong relationship with my mother. They were separated around that time. My question is, how do you let go of the hurt, the pain, and the heartbreak? I want to be better, I want to better myself, but I'm holding back and I need your help. How do I carry that atmosphere and feeling of love home with me and into my relationships? You talk about that often, being in church, and how it's easy to praise and worship in church, but then what happens when you leave?
Yeah. You know, I believe that, and it's one of the reasons why I love the Lord and I love church, because I think church really becomes a family. And, you know, I was raised in a church where, you know, you called everyone brother and sister, you know. So brother TJ, and, you know, sister applesauce. And, you know, as my dad would say, you know, brother sour cream, you know. So, and because creating a family is something that you need. And, you know, what I would say to this person that is dealing with the pain and the trouble of a relationship is there are other people in this room that have gone through the same thing. And when you open yourself up to them and you find the right people that you can trust, then they can be the support that you need. I don't know anyone who has created or has reached a level of success on their own. We can do more together. We need each other. And whether it's your blood relative or whether it's your brother and sister in Christ, when we can unite together, then we can support one another. When you're weak, he's your strength, but then I can be your strength. So I would encourage this person to keep coming to church, take next steps, get involved in a ministry, and you're going to find people who have gone through your similar journey, and you're going to find strength through God, but also through their testimony.
Okay. Another question, it says, how were you able to develop such a confidence in the call of God over your life? What advice would you give someone who is unsure of what they're called to do?
Yeah, you know, first of all, I'll say that everyone's journey is different. When I was very young, I believe my parents have said this, that I was one of their 8 children that was prophesied over when they were very young. I know a lot of my brothers and sisters are incredibly anointed and gifted. We've all had prophetic words spoken over us throughout our lifetime. But I think I was one of the children that got prophesied when I was very young. I think I was like 7 or 8 years old. I was at a church service, and this prophet woman by the name of Madeline Joel called me out of the service and stood me up in front of probably the amount of people that are here right now, maybe 100 or so. And she started to speak these different things over my life about how God was going to use me, how God was going to equipped me, and God was, I don't remember if she said pastor, I don't know if she said preach. I just knew that there was this moment, this kairos moment. Yeah. And I remember from that moment, and my mom can attest to it, I wrestled with, like, what did that mean? I would ask my mom on several times, like, Mom, like how is that, like, what does she mean? Like, how is that gonna happen? Because, growing up, I was one of the children of my parents that, I got into a lot of trouble. I was always involved in mischief. And I mean, if I was raised in this day and age, they'd definitely put me on all type of medication. And the medication that my father used for me was this medication called BELT. And it works. And you ever have your parents say, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you? You're like, yeah, right. And so, yeah, I mean, I was the child that was always in trouble, always involved in mischief. And then I also had a speech impediment. So from a very young age, I just developed a stutter. And, I mean, still to this day, I have to be very cautious of some of the wording. I work really hard on just being very, very clear. My mom would sit down and say to me, son, just, slow your brain down, talk slow. And I'd be like, okay, so I remember thinking to myself, Lord, I don't really know how you're gonna use me to be a preacher or a pastor. I mean, I can't even speak.
So you questioned your purpose?
Oh man, I questioned my purpose all the way up until I was 30 years old, and I'm 46. Actually 29 years old. So after college, I came back to Boston and started working for the ministry, serving my dad. And then my wife and I, we moved to North Carolina. While we were there, up until that time, I was used in administration and finance and real estate, and I was serving my dad in the ministry. And while I was there in North Carolina, my wife and I were praying for my son and just thanking the Lord for him because he's a miracle. And the Lord said to me, thank you for your son, but I'm still waiting for you. And at that moment, I knew what he meant. I knew that I was running from the call to be a senior pastor. And so from that moment, I got up from prayer. I called my dad and I said, Dad, this is what God has said to me. From that moment on, I never questioned his call and the purpose of God upon my life. But from that moment until now, there have been obviously many hills and valleys and ups and downs and adversities. But those have just strengthened.
Now, I imagine someone who might be questioning their purpose and doesn't know to use all of the things you just mentioned as a resource to get clarity. What would you tell that person who's sort of clouded? They hear you talking, they don't really know what that means for them right now. They still don't know what they want to do. So how do they take that next step to getting that clarity?
Well, for me, I was blessed that I had incredible parents, and I was blessed that I have this incredible wife who saw something in me, even when I couldn't necessarily see it in myself. And your purpose leaves tracks. So you can always look back and see where God has brought you from, and there's also a very clear line of where he's taking you to. And so when I look back over the course of my life, I realized that the Lord had been preparing me for leadership my entire life. And I was blessed that I had people around me that could just affirm, that is God. Yeah, you are called. Yes, you are going to be a leader. And yes, there is something greater inside of you than you can't necessarily see. And I trusted their wisdom. And so I would say, everyone in this room needs 3 levels of accountability. You need people in your life that you're kind of on your same level. You need people that are looking up to you because it's going to help you to to continue to walk a particular path. But then you need someone over you that you can be submitted to, that you can be accountable to, that can speak something into your life that you can't necessarily see. And unfortunately, we're in a world where there's so many people that are afraid of those type of relationships. And so they're islands without any real support.
I think a lot of people worry that they're going to look bad if they don't have all the answers. And who does have all the answers? And so going back to what you said before about being involved with a community who could speak some truth into you and tell you how it is, maybe what you don't see, is so valuable.
Yeah. I say this all the time, that, you know, what social media has done is, and even just technology has done, it has magnified the exceptions that happen in the world instead of the rule. So basketball, LeBron James is an exception. You don't see men 6'10", 6'9", 280. He's probably way more than that. I mean, being able to jump 40, run, jump, shoot like that, he's an exception. And so you can't necessarily follow his path. And I don't know too many people that you know, when they were young, they grew up, they knew exactly what they were going to do and their purpose was out of it. I mean, most people, you're on a journey, and God is directing you, and you being open to God's voice, and you being open to God say, this is the way, walk ye in it. And then being able to have some people around you that can confirm that. That's the rule. I mean, there are some exceptions out there, like there are some LeBron James out there, but following the rule, I think, is more valuable for us in this time.
Another question, Pastor Matt, where do you find the time to write a book? You've got a lot going on, and you've got a lot of things to juggle. How do you organize so that you could get something like that done and prioritize?
I mean, how can I say this? I think there are certain things that some people are gifted with. And one of my gifts, which I think is a gift, and I'm just honored that I have this gift, is the gift of discipline. So I've always lived a pretty disciplined life. And so once I put my mind to do something, I'm kind of like a tunnel vision type of person. And so I carved out a day every Monday from 3 to 5 that I wrote. And, you know, there was a season where I was writing on my own, and then there was a season where I found an editor and someone that I can write with and bounce things off that really kind of helped me. And that system really worked for me. And I just disciplined myself and disciplined my time. I made sure that, you know, I prioritized the fact that the Lord wanted me to write this book.
Another question. In the book, you reference you and Pastor Mona's challenge in having Maddie. What advice would you give couples that are on the verge of giving up on their journey to having kids? It's obviously a really tough thing.
Yeah, I would say never give up. And I would say that God can. There are so many children out there in foster care. There are so many children out there that need love, that need a home. And you don't know how God can open your heart. You know, because what you make happen for others, God will make happen for you. So I'd say never give up, but then I would say, you know, maybe the Lord is also, you know, protecting or softening or opening your heart to loving a child that may not be yours. But I believe that God will give you desires of your heart, and He has to answer. He has to respond. His promises are yes. And then the amen is spoken by you. And when you say amen, you're saying, God, however you want to do it, and whatever your timing is. Right. I'd say never give up. Don't allow the doubts or the fears or the enemy to steal something from you that you know is yours. You know, sometimes, I mean, when my wife and I were going through, there were many doctors that told us, it's no way, you know, or, you know, she's past the age, or there's nothing more we can do, or we're not going to give you another cycle of this particular medication. And man, I can't imagine what my life would be like without my son. So never give up.
Yeah, had you listened to the doubt, it would totally change where you are right now.
Let me say this, that's not just about children. That's about, you know, birthing a dream. That has everything to do with not giving up on a business or an idea or even a relationship. It's like sometimes we give up just way too easy. We allow the trick of the enemy, the lies from the enemy, or the fears of our own self-doubt to rob us from our children. And it's not always just physical children, but that we're birthing something. I think everyone in this room, you're pregnant with something. And the enemy doesn't want you to release that thing. He wants you to abort it.
I think it's also easy sometimes to get confused and be like, well, I go to church every week, or I'm a part of ministry, and so I'm immune to that. But we just talked very early on about how you were ready to just scrap the whole book.
Yeah.
So I think we know this, but it's a good reminder to know that no one's immune to that.
Yeah. And so the Lord taught me, even in believing God for children, that there are going to be other things that the Lord is going to want me to birth. And I was going to have to fight for it. And I was going to have to believe like never before, the same way I believed for my son. It's not just the book. It's what God, I believe what God is saying to us as a church, what God is saying to our city, what God is saying, you know, to our nation. There's something that we have to hold on to and not just so easily give up, you know. Us sitting here talking with one another, different backgrounds, different cultures, different perspectives. I mean, we got to fight for this. You know, it's easy to just to say, you know, we can't relate, or we can't, you know, ever, but we have to birth something, and I think it's worth it at the end.
Absolutely, and beautiful relationships, beautiful births come out of that trust.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Well, one last question. Chapter 1, you talk about a wind of change. How do you survive the storm without allowing the storm to destroy you? I think a lot of what you just said answers that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you survive a storm when you know that you have an anchor. You survive a storm when you know without a shadow of a doubt that you're where you're supposed to be. And man, once you accept the call of ministry, be ready for storms. You're going to go through several storms in your life, you know, in your journey. But when you're anchored and when you can't be shaken, the Bible says that once again, I will shake the heavens and the earth. And what can be shaken needs to be shaken. So sometimes we go through a storm and there's a shaking that needs to take place because what needs to be shaken or what can be shaken needs to be shaken. But what will remain will be the thing that will sustain you for the next storm. You know, my prayer for everyone that is here, everyone that may be watching even one of these clips, or, you know, you're swiping and you stumbled upon my YouTube channel or my page, or you stumbled upon our book or maybe our story. My prayer is that every one of you in this room, that, and I've been saying this for the past couple of Sundays, it's that it's not the storm, or it's not even the mistakes or the challenges you've gone through that should define you. It's kind of what you're carrying. It's that knower that's on the inside of you. It's that anchor that is going to sustain you. That's going to sustain your family. That's going to sustain your church. And man, you guys are carrying something. Everyone in this room, you're carrying something. You have been, if I could prophesy to everyone in this room, I would say, man, you are carrying a dream. You are carrying a vision. You are a part of something that is bigger than yourself. And when you align yourself with the purpose of God, and you allow kairos moments to happen, and you allow kingdom relationships to edify and build your life, then man, you're unstoppable.